In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello, everyone. This is Father Stephen Allen, and at long last, we're back to our Orthodox Survival course. This is Class 42, which I entitled Faith Comes First, Session 1. So obviously we're going to have more sessions on Faith Comes First. And today I'm going to announce a new approach and make some preliminary remarks about our next section, this next group of talks we're going to do. I want to ask your forgiveness for taking so long to record our next session. I've realized I have to take a different approach in order to do our Orthodox Survival course regularly. I'd like to get something out every week, and I haven't been doing that, and I ask your forgiveness for that, because I know a lot of y'all are waiting to hear from me. Not because it's me, but because I'm telling you things that are important and that you're thirsting for and that you need. But if I continue to insist on writing these formal 3,000-word essays I've been doing lately, our sessions will come less and less often, because I've taken on further responsibilities within our church in North America. Most recently, I've gotten involved in our St. John of Damascus Orthodox Educational Initiative, which is an online program we're starting for Orthodox parents who want to supplement their children's schooling or who are doing full-blown homeschooling with their children. And I'm teaching Latin to 10 of our young people across the world. 2 of my students are in Serbia. The wonders of the internet, right? So I've been deeply involved getting back to my preferred occupation, on the human level, which is being a Latin teacher. And but of course that's not my primary occupation, which is not an occupation but a vocation, which is to be a priest of the Orthodox Church. And so I'm happily sharing with you my testimony to the faith, of course. So I've been involved in the St. John of Damascus Orthodox Educational Initiative. It's just a further responsibility I've taken on within our church in North America, and I guess now worldwide. And so that's also added to the problem of talking to y'all less frequently. But I want to get back to it. So don't hold my toes to the fire, but I want to get you something every week if I can. So I have to go to a different approach. We're going to treat our class as a class, in which the teacher has a few notes in front of him and then just talks based on what he knows, okay? Which is what our original classes were. Our original Orthodox Survival course was a class I was doing with the adults at my parish on a weekly or semi-weekly, or semi-monthly basis, and we were just talking. I mean, I had notes, as y'all know, which you've read, but it had the greater liveliness of a class with people asking questions and so forth. But it hasn't really worked out to keep having these classes. But I want to treat now my talks, even though I'm just recording this and just sending it out to you. I'm going to go back and treat this more simply as a talk rather than trying to write a polished essay. So I shall henceforward publish my notes in outline form with main points, reading suggestions, and links to online resources. So what you're going to see in the notes from now on, my notes are posted at my blog, which is orthodoxtruth.org. Orthodoxtruth.org is my blog. That's where I post the notes. These notes from henceforward, at least for the foreseeable future, are not going to be these finished essays which I've been writing, and which I'll tell you, they take 3 hours, an hour for every 1,000 words. And so 3 hours plus recording, getting it out there, basically eats up my workday. And I've got so many other responsibilities. That's why I've been very delinquent about getting back to y'all. So from now on, the notes are going to be outlines with basic points, and also, very importantly, reading suggestions. Because my hope is to get y'all studying on your own, thinking, really reading, and really thinking a lot of these things through. It's the old saying, it's better to teach a man how to fish than to give him a fish. Well, I want to teach you how to fish. And so I'm going to give you main points, reading suggestions, and links to online resources rather than writing these finished essays. So the drawback is that I'm going to be speaking off the cuff, and perhaps I shall make some mistakes, in fact, or be too rough in my style. And if I make mistakes, if you all know something I don't know, well, feel free to tell me, because I want to learn too. I'm not some huge expert. I'm your fellow learner. You might say I'm the senior student in the classroom. And if I'm too rough, let me know. I apologize. Sometimes we're all human beings. We get carried away. I'm not in some holy elder, who has apathia, and I'm never going to say anything rough or never lose my temper or whatever. I'm just a fellow Christian with you, and I'm trying to help you in these very important issues which are so pressing in all of us. And we can't wait till we're perfect holy elders before we say anything. Otherwise, who'd say anything? By speaking of all this elder stuff, I'm going to get back to that later on. So I might be kind of rough. And also to benefit, you won't be able just to read my notes, because it won't be an essay, it's just going to be notes. That'd be like reading a teacher's notes for a lecture. So to benefit, you're going to have to listen to the audio recording. But advantages will be that I can speak to you more frequently if I'm not writing, exerting all this effort and a formal rhetorical effort. And I can speak at greater length because I can just talk. And you'll hear my real voice, which is what you're hearing now. Of course, the voice you read when I read my essays is an essayist's voice. It's a legitimate voice of a rhetorician. But what you're hearing now is if you were seeing me in the classroom or talking to me personally. And you may like it or not like it. I'm not always a likable person. But at least you're getting the real thing. This is the Father Stephen Raw, so to speak. So it'll have the more lively style of a radio talk show or a classroom with an engaged lecturer and an engaged, I hope, an engaged audience. Okay. So I ask your forgiveness, but as I'm asking your forgiveness for not speaking to you more frequently, I promise to speak more frequently, and I have to come back with my hat in my hand, my skufos right in my hand, and ask for your support. I've said quietly in the past, I've only spoken about this basically once. I put out an appeal once a few months ago. But I have to repeat that my little parish of St. Irene Priest of Alandu in Rochester Hills, Michigan, of which I'm very proud, they're great people. That's right, they're just the best parishioners I've ever had in 33 years as a priest. It'll be 34 years this December. They lovingly support my family as much as they can. They're a very small parish, and I would say their level of giving per household is far above that of the average Orthodox parish, because that ain't saying much. Because as we say down in Louisiana French say, most Orthodox don't give pacon to the church. Pacon is slang Louisiana French for a pecan. We have a lot of pecan trees down in the Voiles Parish where my mother's from. And we say that people, they don't do pacon, they don't do nothing. And so most Orthodoxes don't do nothing for their church. They don't give pacon. But my parishioners of St. Irene do give. They give lovingly and generously. However, we're very small, so they can't support us full-time. And basically, they and a few other donors within our church, and a few of you listeners, very few of you listeners, compared to the numbers that listen, are underwriting everything I do for you, my internet audience, even though so much of my time is not given to my parish, and it's given to y'all, right? So in fairness to them, to my parishioners, and to these few donors who are supporting us, and so I can go on doing this, I don't have to get a job working over here at Hillsdale College as a night watchman or something, please consider a gift to help me out. Please consider a gift to help me out. If you have PayPal, you can send a one-time gift or a recurring gift, which would be nice, right, of X amount per month to my account at FRSTEVENALLEN. That's just FR for father, right? And my name, Stephen Allen, Stephen with a V. I was born in the 1950s, and I think my father, who loved television, probably was a fan of Steve Allen, who was the original host of the Tonight Show. And so he gave me Stephen with a V instead of the more classical PH, which for a classicist like me is kind of a sorrow, but that's all right because I love my parents, so I ain't going to change my spelling of my name. You can send a one-time gift or a recurring gift of X amount per month, which would be nice, to my PayPal account at FRSTEVENALLEN FRSTEVENALLEN@gmail.com. If you want to send a relatively large amount for which you would like to receive a receipt for a tax deduction, I don't blame you. Might as well get back from the robbers of the federal government what you can. The federal government really is blasphemous. God only asks for 10%. They take 33% or 50%, whatever, the blasphemers. So if you'd like to receive a receipt for a tax deduction, contact me at that email, at my email address that I just gave you. And I can tell you how to donate to our parish, to St. Irene. And we have a wonderful, excellent, competent treasurer who will send you a receipt for your donation so you can get a tax deduction, and they'll pass on the gift to me for my support. So let's get on to our subject. The title of this whole section is Faith Comes First, because we've spent a lot of time in our recent remarks talking about the culture of nihilism, and we're surrounded by all these problems. I mean, whoever thought we'd come to the day when teachers in schools are telling 5-year-olds they don't know if they're a boy or a girl? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is demonic, absurd lunacy. Okay, this is beyond wrong or beyond immoral. It's absolutely demonically insane. Okay, so we're living in a demonically insane environment. There are so many things wrong. You can look around and you don't know what to do next. You can get paralyzed by how horrible it is, and then you can't even take it seriously on the other hand because it's so stupid. All right, so you get paralyzed by all this evil, and you just get weirded out by the total insanity, lunacy, and stupidity, idiocy of the whole thing. So you don't know what to do. What do we do next? Okay. But the point I made in my last class was that we have to calm down and realize that Orthodoxy does have the answers. And Orthodoxy is not just a set of answers. Orthodoxy is not just an oxy or a doxy or not just a philosophy or a belief system. Orthodoxy is life, and that life is lived in the church. And the question is, where is the church? And if we have moral confidence, we are in the church, we're in the ark of salvation, then calmly and peacefully and with the grace of God, with prayer, with the sacramental life of the church, with the teaching of the fathers, with the brotherhood in the church, with our pastors and our fellow Orthodox helping us, advising us, counseling us, supporting us, with the grace that's in the church, we can confidently, calmly face the maelstrom, the cataclysm, the new Noah's flood of apostasy and total insanity that's going on around us. We can be at peace because we know, all right, well, it's the flood out there, it's the great cataclysm, but we're in the ark, we're in the church. So the church is the answer. We have to put the church first. This is life or death. Extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside the church there's no salvation. That's been true forever. I mean, for 2,000 years we've been saying that, and it's true. Outside the church there's no salvation. By the way, I want to make a remark about this saying, outside the church there's no salvation. Nowadays, all these relativists and limp-wristed, feel-good, snowflake type people say, well, that's mean. Yeah, outside the church there's no salvation. You're saying all the poor little, heathens, all the poor little, sodomites or whatever, they're not in the church and they're going to go to hell, and y'all are mean and all this kind of thing. And that's ridiculous. I mean, that's the response of a 2-year-old, right? Or of a brain-addled idiot. We have to turn this around and look at the reality. When our pagan ancestors, I say our, if some of y'all are Jewish, well, God bless you. Jewish who are interested in Christian orthodoxy, God bless you. But I'd say most of us, I assume, most of our ancestors are heathens, right? Gentiles. When our pagan ancestors heard outside the church there's no salvation, what they heard was the obverse, or the reverse. In the church there is salvation. They were happy to hear there is salvation. That's the point. And the church's doors are open. Nobody shut them. Nobody's telling the little Chinese or the Africans or the Protestants or the heretics of various kinds or the atheists they can't join the church. We're just saying y'all are wrong. You got to get in the church, right? And the church's doors are open. But you have to accept the teaching of the church and the authority of the church. If you've got a problem with that, if you've decided you've got some other kind of salvation, go for it. Okay? It's not mean or cruel to say outside the church there's no salvation. We're just telling people the truth. But the most important thing is the positive part. In the church there is salvation. When our pagan ancestors heard that there is salvation, they were overjoyed because they didn't think there was some kind of salvation. They just thought they were going to die and go down to the netherworld and be shades. You ever read the Odyssey? And, old Odysseus goes down there to ask questions of somebody down in the netherworld, and everybody's a shade, a shadow. They're sad. Right? So when the apostles went forth to preach, the pagan world was overjoyed to hear there was salvation. And the more serious people are happy to hear there's a serious answer. Okay, if there is salvation, that must be the most serious, important thing, so I have to know where it is. What's in the church? Good. Where's the church? And that's our question. Where is the church? And once we have the answer to that question, and we know we're in the ark of salvation, we can deal with whatever problems come because we know that we're in God's hands and that God's all-powerful, that He desires our salvation, and that if you're in the church, you can ride out this flood, this new Noah's flood of apostasy going on around us. So last time I concluded Talk 41 saying that the big question revolves around the apostasy of the official Orthodox hierarchies in the 20th century. So the big picture is we cannot combat all the woes of this nihilistic culture, the culture of death and so forth that we're dealing with, till we deal with this fundamental question, this fundamental problem of the leadership of the historical institutions of the church turning traitor and collaborating with the Antichrist revolution. I'll say that again. The big picture is that we cannot combat all the woes of the nihilistic culture around us, the culture war question, right? Till we deal with this fundamental problem of the leadership of the historical, venerable institutions of the church turning traitor and collaborating with the Antichrist revolution. So I concluded last time saying the big question revolves around the apostasy of the official Orthodox hierarchies in the 20th century, which continues to this day, of course. And in this class, I said this class today, I said I was going to give you a rundown of the history of ecumenism in the 20th century, and where each jurisdiction now stands vis-a-vis ecumenism. But then, since then, I've realized that I need to do some preliminary teaching first, some preliminary remarks, so that we can approach this history lesson and this evaluation of our contemporary situation with greater understanding. So as we go along, I plan to keep referring you to books and articles to read, both hard copy books, as they say, and online. And I think one of my main goals is to just get you reading about these things so you can make informed decisions where you belong. Where's the church? Where's the Orthodox Church? Where do I belong? And each of you has to decide that. You know, I'm not going to I can't twist anybody's arm to join my jurisdiction, or to leave World Orthodoxy and join True Orthodoxy, or to leave off being a Roman Catholic and become an Orthodox. But I can offer you things to read and then my own insights as God helps me. Okay, so my first preliminary remark. Who are you and who am I? Like, who is listening to this talk? And who am I to be giving it to you? I mean, why should you listen to me? I mean, from what I can deduce, y'all are coming from various places, all of you listening to this talk. Some of you are in my own Orthodox jurisdiction. So here's, I'm going to make a complete disclosure, right, of who I am. I'm a priest in the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece. The Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, or True Orthodox Christians of Greece, depending on the translation of the word. The Genuine Orthodox Church of Greece, under Archbishop Kalinikos. He's in Athens. He's the head of our synod. And our church here in North America, my metropolis, or diocese, is under Metropolitan Demetrius of America. And so that's, I know a lot of y'all listening to this are my own fellow GOC people under Archbishop Kalinikos, or other GOCs or TOCs, other True Orthodox. And some of y'all listening are in so-called world or official Orthodox jurisdictions, you know, the Antiochian Patriarchate, OCA, ROCOR, MP, the Moscow Patriarchate, Bulgarian Patriarchate, so forth and so on, the Greek Archdiocese, Ecumenical Patriarchate, and all that. So y'all are coming from different places. Some of you are not yet even Orthodox, but you're searching, you're looking maybe for Christianity itself, or for Orthodoxy itself, and you're not there yet, and you found me on the internet somehow, because you can find just about anything on the internet, even Father Stephen. So y'all are coming from different places. And so I need to accomplish some goals just in framing our discussion from here on out. So we're a cohesive group. We're a teacher and a class, or we're a discussion leader and fellow discussers, right, who are helping each other. So I have to give enough background on ecclesiology and church history to make this, what we're talking about, comprehensible to everybody. Okay, so y'all are coming from different places. People have different amounts of knowledge about how what the criteria are for deciding what is the church. All right, and then a lot of you don't know none of us really knows all the details of the complicated history of the 20th century, which is just a mess, right? So I have to make some effort to talk about in every case, right, there's law and there's evidence. Okay, the law is, what is the church's ecclesiology? What is the church's teaching? What are the canons and all that? And then the evidence is, what's the history? Who's done what? Who said what? Where's the smoking gun? And so forth. So we have to do that. Then I have to give an apologia, as we say in Greek, an apology, which actually means a defense, not asking forgiveness. That's funny. In Greek, apologia means a defense. In English, it's come to mean asking forgiveness. But I need to give an apologia in the Greek sense, the original sense, for where and who I am. And y'all, should want to know this. Who's this man talking to us? And what's his credibility? So let me give you I've never done this in this whole course. I've never given you an autobiography. So let me tell you briefly who I am without dilating tiresomely on it. I'm 62 years old. I was born in 1957 in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I grew up in New Orleans. I grew up in a Roman Catholic family. I'm the oldest of 6 children. My mother is God rest her soul. My mother's native language was French. She's a Louisiana French. My ancestors in Louisiana moved there in 1790s and spoke French and were French after World War II, when all this cultural genocide started against all of our local cultures. And my grandparents hardly spoke English on my mother's side. And I'm very proud of my French ancestry, and I'm proud of being a Louisianian. And then on my father's side, my father's from North Louisiana. He was raised in a Protestant family. He converted to Catholicism to marry my mother. And I was born they were buried in 56, St. Joseph Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I was born in Lafayette where my father worked at the time, but I grew up in New Orleans. And I went to the Catholic seminary in high school and college. I was a seminarian. So from the time I was 13 till I was 22 years old, I was a Catholic seminarian. And I learned about Orthodoxy in the seminary, taught by Benedictine monks in St. Joseph Abbey in Louisiana. Started reading the Church Fathers, reading the history of the Church, and realized, wow, this is it, man. This is the Christianity I've been looking for, but where is it? I'm not in it. And it was actually one of my Benedictine professors who said, well, Steve, you should, he said, he was a good ecumenist, he said, you should go to an Orthodox church. I said, well, I've never been to an Orthodox church. So I decided to be Orthodox before I'd ever even met an Orthodox person. All we had in New Orleans was a Greek Archdiocese, and then later on a little Antiochian mission, where I eventually ended up converting. So I decided to be Orthodox when I was 20 years old. I didn't convert until I was 26, because that's a very tough decision. That's very emotional. Everybody I knew was Catholic, except for my father's Protestant family. And so it's very hard to leave behind. All your friends are Catholic priests and nuns and seminarians and professors and so forth. But I decided, by the time I was 26, I met my wife, another convert from Catholicism, in the Antiochian Church. We were received into Orthodoxy. We married in the Antiochian Church. But after a couple of years, I said, no, can't do this. Too much Freemasonry, the new calendar, ecumenism. Every Sunday they're giving communion to Copts or Monophysites. I said, well, I didn't leave the Chalcedonian Roman Catholic Church to join the non-Chalcedonians. What's going on here? So I decided to join the Russian Church abroad, which at that time was not practically, although juridically had never broken communion, but practically was not in communion with so-called world orthodoxy. And ended up being a priest relatively early on. I was ordained at age 28, which for the sticklers of canonical accuracy is bad. But if we look back, and I was just reading the life of St. John of Kronstadt the other day, I think he was ordained at 26, which is not uncommon in the Russian Church. They'd often cheat, ordain us young folks. And so I've been a priest since 1985. I was ordained by Bishop Gregory Grabe, who was at that time assistant to St. Metropolitan Philaret of New York, who had just reposed. St. Philaret reposed just a few weeks before I was ordained a priest. I was in the Russian Church abroad till 2000. I had different pastoral assignments. And I left the Russian Church abroad, the official Russian Church abroad, basically because I couldn't. After a while, after holding my nose and putting up with it for years, I couldn't take the fact that they were still in communion with bishops who were in the World Council of Churches, which to me is just like a no-no. I mean, you just can't do that. So after a while, I said, I'm sorry, I love y'all, but I got to go. So I joined the Greco Calendar Church. I've been a Greco Calendarist, so-called True Orthodox, the Greek Church, since 2000. And I'm very happy in our jurisdiction. We have good bishops, and they're doing an amazingly good job under the circumstances we live in today. So that's who I am. Or a thumbnail sketch of my background. So that's where I'm coming from. Full disclosure, I'm a Greco Calendarist in the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece under Bishop Kalinikos. I was ordained in the Russian Church abroad, and I'm still very grateful for the amazingly good, amazingly for the 20th century. I mean, the Russian Church abroad in the 20th century is a miracle of not only true orthodoxy but common sense, which you don't find very often nowadays anywhere. And so I'm very grateful. And if anybody tells y'all, well, he's a defrocked priest or he's schismatic, blah, 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 you asked him to show you a document from the Russian Church abroad that they defrocked me. They did not. And as a matter of fact, the Russian Church abroad has never disowned the ordinations of the old calendarists back in the early 1960s. So if they tell y'all, well, the Russian Church abroad is now repents of ordaining the Greek calendarists, and Father Stephen was defrocked by his bishop, and all that's all a bunch of nonsense. So let me go on. So I have to give you all a background on ecclesiology and church history, which I plan to do. Give an apologia, or at least a rundown, a background of who I am, where I am. So I've done that briefly. And one thing to do is I want to confirm my fellow true Orthodox in their convictions. All of you true Orthodox, you all who've left the comfort of the big institution, I'm very proud of you for your heroism and your sacrifices. And I want to buck you up, because often nobody's bucking you up. And as y'all who are World Orthodox, you're in the Antiochians, you're in OCA, you're Greek Archdiocese, ROCOR, now new ROCOR, 2.0 or whatever, this Moscow Patriarchate ROCOR, whatever it is. I love y'all, and I hope I can help you. And if you disagree with me, I won't take it personally. Yeah, but I need to, I believe, as the Psalm says, I believed wherefore I spake. I was humbled exceedingly. We have to say what we believe, even if we're humbled in the process. So I just want to share with you what I know, and you can do what you want with it. And also, those of you who are inquirers to orthodoxy, you have to, caveat emptor, the buyer beware. I'm going to give you consumer information about what you're getting into, so that when you join the Orthodox Church, you're joining what is really the Orthodox Church, and not a bunch of LARPers. LARPers are live-action role players. So you can have LARPers who have the best costumes, maybe better costumes than the real people. And so to make sure you're not just doing LARPers or a Potemkin village front of orthodoxy, and not the real deal. And the real deal is often much less attractive outwardly than the fake deal. Okay, so those are some preliminary remarks about who are you and who am I. Okay, another preliminary remark. There's the old saying, "Don't take this personally." Okay, but we cannot help but take all this stuff personally, right? Because it's the most personal thing of all. This involves our eternal destiny, right? Right. That saying, "Don't talk about politics and religion." You know who made up that saying? The Masons. That's a Masonic propaganda tool. Get people, don't talk about politics and religion. Okay, why? Because they want to control the discourse, right? So they want people in their social interactions not to talk about politics and religion because it's too touchy. So you might argue and have bad feelings. But we got to talk about religion because that's about our eternal destiny. We got to talk about politics because, as Aristotle says, politics is the most complete or highest form of ethical philosophy, right? It's the whole our structure and understanding of how we live with each other in society. And since we're not, Rousseau's Le Bon Sauvage, just evolved apes roaming around the woods, right? But we're real human beings living in society. Politics is actually very important. Essential. It's essential. It's the most essential thing after religion. So we have to take all this stuff personally. And in particular, those of you, my beloved listeners and friends who are so-called world Orthodox, you're in an official jurisdiction, you might get upset about some things I say about your bishops, because by extension it applies to your priests, and you probably love your priests, and I hope you do. I hope my parishioners love me, and I'm fond of people in world Orthodoxy. I was, I'm still fond of my brothers I left behind in the Russian Church abroad, even though I think they made a mistake when they got subsumed by the Moscow Patriarchate. This is not about losing personal regard for people, unless they really lose your regard by their hypocrisy or criminality or mendacity. It's all right to get upset about these things. If you don't get upset, you're either some holy elder who has some apatheia, and you're just above all that, or you just don't care. You're insensible. But if you're like me, you're an ordinary person just struggling with all this stuff, you're going to get upset, and that's all right, because if things are really important, those are things we should get upset about, right? People nowadays people get upset because they didn't get the poor clerk at the coffee shop didn't get their order for a mocha latte, decaf, ice, blah blah with ice with whipped cream on it. That's what most people get upset about today. But the few real human beings who are left get upset about what we're talking about, which is our eternal salvation. So if you get upset, if you want to throw your coffee mug at the computer screen and curse Father Stephen, go for it, because I don't blame you. Okay. So preliminary remark, that was preliminary remark number 2. This is personal. If you get upset, it doesn't bother me. I get upset too. Okay. Preliminary remark topic 3. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your eye on the ball. Okay, the ball is, where is the true confession of faith, and therefore where is the church? Right? Now, the true confession of faith is not sufficient to tell you where is the church, but it is necessary. I'll say that again. The true confession of faith is not sufficient to show you where is the church. Because you could have Joe Blow off in the corner. It's something like me when I was now 20 years old. I believed in Orthodoxy, but I wasn't in the church. All right, so I had the true confession of faith, and if you ask what you believed, I'd say, well, I believe in what the Orthodoxy teaches, even though I'm still officially or sacramentally a Roman Catholic. So that's not sufficient, but it is necessary. So keep your eye on the ball. It is necessary to have a true confession of faith. That means not just a private opinion, but it means an open confession of faith, and not being in communion with, prayerful communion, or any agreement, open agreement on doctrinal issues with heretics. All right, so you have to keep your eye on the ball. So don't get sidetracked by other stuff. What is stuff that sidetracks us? When we're talking about Orthodoxy, and all of you who are Orthodox, you know all this. Some of you who are new to Orthodoxy, you don't know all this, so I have to beg your indulgence. If you can't follow me, I'll just hang on, and you'll get it after a while. One of the big things we're talking about, the world Orthodox versus the true Orthodox, or versus the so-called old calendarists. Something they fling at us is, well, y'all are saying we have no grace in our sacraments. There's no grace. So my priest has no grace. And I want to talk about this, because this grace, no grace thing is a red herring. Right? This is not the first question. First of all, it was not the old calendarists or the true Orthodox who brought up the grace, no grace. The first time anybody in this controversy was accused of having no grace was in the state church of Greece. The official church, the new calendarists, in 1933, declared that the old calendarists had no grace. Not only that, because it was a state church, and the Greek constitution linked the church to the Greek state. There's our old calendarist marriages and baptisms regarded as illegal, and our people had many legal disabilities for decades because of the state church saying our sacraments are invalid. So that our bishops didn't say anything about grace, no grace, till later on, till 1935. So if these new calendar know-it-alls say, well, y'all saying we have no grace, I say, well, y'all started it. Okay, so that's the first thing to know. The other thing to know is, it's not the first question. Okay, grace is not some created substance, some magic, Orthodox juju juice that official magical cultic functionaries carried around in a mason jar. No allusion intended, though is probably appropriate. So grace isn't this thing that official cultic functionaries who are authorized by some authority recognized by the New York Times or by the World Council of Churches, that some official functionary carries around in a jar and can dispense, because he's the official dispenser of this juju, magic energy inside of a jar he's carrying around with him. Okay, that's the Roman Catholic idea of what grace is, right? Grace is the uncreated energies of God. Okay, it's bombarding people at everything, every created thing at every moment. But for the grace to come inside the nous, right, the spiritual intellect, to come in the naos, the temple of the heart, and bring about salvation and regeneration, sanctification, theosis, and all those good things, there has to be a true confession of faith. And you have to be in the church. And then it comes. Then sacramental grace is there. All right? But to talk about the question of grace first, without talking about the question of where is the church, is certainly putting the cart before the horse. And the other thing is that it's disabling because it's very emotional. Well, you're saying, all my life, it was emotional for me when I was Catholic. Are you saying all my life? I was a little kid, 5 years old, sitting in adoration in front of the Blessed Sacrament, for kneeling there. I was a child. I could kneel there for, a long time. And I loved being in Catholic Church and believing that was Jesus present in the tabernacle. And then it's very emotional to say, well, maybe that really isn't. Maybe I need to join the Orthodox Church. Okay, so if you're world Orthodox, you're Antiochian or whatever, and you love your priest and you're having a good experience and this feels good and you're so happy to be Orthodox, blah, blah, and then some crazy person, Father Stephen or whoever, tells you, well, maybe you're not in the church. Oh, and there's no grace. There's no grace. Wow, that's very emotional. So the whole no grace thing is very emotional, and it's disabling. Because let's not start with that, right? We have to start with where's the church. We have to calmly, dispassionately, as much as possible for us passionate people, because it's a question of what are the criteria for where is the church. That's the first question. Where is the church? All right, so let's talk about that and have this grace no grace thing. Well, that'll figure itself out, as we go along. Another soundbite or a sidetrack is people tell you about the church calendar. They call us true Orthodox sometimes old calendarists, as if our whole dogma is the calendar, and say, well, the calendar is not a dogmatic issue. Those people just care about the calendar. Well, that's ridiculous. Okay, and I would encourage you to read a document called "The Calendar Question" by Father Basile Sakas. Father Basile Sakas. It's still a very good exposition of the calendar question. So it's called The Calendar Question, and in my notes, I've got a link to our metropolis. That is, when I say metropolis, that's our diocese, our bishop's local church here. The Calendar Question by Father Basile Sakas. It's on this link that I'm going to give you in the notes on my blog. So, no, it may be not a dogmatic issue, strictly speaking, or maybe it is. So read Father Basile Sakas' essay first and inform yourself before you just listen to the soundbite. In fact, the idea that we true Orthodox care only about the calendar is absolutely absurd. The calendar was the first salvo fired in this war against Orthodoxy going on since the 1920s. And if anything, all the subsequent events of the 20th century have absolutely confirmed the decision of our fathers in the 20s to reject the new calendar. Everything they predicted would happen has happened with the change of the calendar. So we're all going to talk about the calendar as we go along, but don't get sidetracked by people saying dumb things like, well, it's not a dogmatic issue, so you shouldn't worry about that, or well, the old calendar is just worship 13 days. These are just childish statements. Okay, then there's this idea of canonical. There's this crude understanding of what's canonical. When people say canonical, they just mean what's official or big, or recognized by the media and the government, or whatever, as being the real church, the established church. When people tell me, well, you old calendarists are uncanonical, I say, well, which canons have our bishops broken, and which canons have your bishops broken? Being canonical is about following the canons. And I'll tell y'all right now, everybody's breaking the canons all the time. But the canons that we don't break are the canons that affect the faith itself. And the canons that the world Orthodox are always breaking are those that affect the faith itself. That is, praying with the Pope and the Dalai Lama and rabbis and imams. And the canons that they get obsessed about are the ones that involve procedure and turf. What's funny about turf? I'll give you all an example. Okay. Now that we all know, everybody in the Orthodox world now knows, everybody following the news knows, that there's this huge rift in official Orthodoxy between Moscow and Constantinople. Now, Constantinople has been on a career of apostasy since the 1920s. In the 1960s, Patriarch Athenagoras said he has the same religion as the Pope. And they've reaffirmed this so many times. You know, the Patriarchs of Constantinople have made almost countless heretical statements for decades now. And the Moscow Patriarchate never broke communion with them over that, over the faith. But now, when Bartholomew, who's a tool of the CIA, creates this phony church in the Ukraine, then the Moscow Patriarchate flips out and they break communion. Why? Because it's about turf. It's about who owns what, right? So that shows you what they care about. So don't give me this stuff about who's canonical. Okay? So this whole idea of they're uncanonical. That's just an accusation. You know, it's like they throw stuff against the wall and see what's going to stick. Okay? So let's get back to the real question. What canons are we talking about? And which canons have they broken? And which canons have we broken? That's the question. Right? Canonical just doesn't mean some official big approved thing. Okay? That's a childish understanding. Then also they get caught up, people don't get caught up in procedural issues. Well, you can't break communion until you jump through these hoops and there's an ecumenical council and there's all this complicated procedural stuff that could take hundreds of years, and finally at some point you break communion with the official canonical big church. Okay, it's not, so what they do is they put smoke in your eyes by saying you got to go through all these incredible, complicated legalistic procedures before you break communion with a bishop who's praying with witch doctors. Okay, that's ridiculous. Okay, so don't get caught up in procedural issues. We have to focus on the faith. Who's confessing the faith? And what compromises faith so essentially that a bishop's really not a bishop anymore, or you have sufficient enough reason to believe he's not a bishop to break communion with him. That's the question, right? Not inventing 100 hoops to jump through before you can break communion to save your soul, to get away from some bishop who's praying with the Dalai Lama or who's hugging Pope Francis, right? Then there's the emotional issue of saints and good priests. Well, in World Orthodox we have Saint this, Saint Paisios, or Saint Porphyrius. You can't get caught up in all that. I can dig up examples of post-schism Roman Catholic saints who worked thousands of verified miracles. Or there are so many testimonies from Lourdes of genuine miracles at Lourdes in France. Does that mean you all should become Roman Catholics? Okay, so this is it's a red herring. It's a side issue. That doesn't mean that sanctity isn't associated with true confession of faith. It certainly is. But you don't just assume somebody's a saint and then go and say, well, therefore, Father so-and-so is a saint and he's said stay with the patriarch, so I'm going to stay with the patriarch. That's bad reasoning. I'm going to explain why. And then there's the idea of good priests. Well, my priest is good. I know the bishops in the World Council of Churches, and I know that last Sunday my local Greek Archdiocese bishop prayed with the cardinal. But my priest is good. He just tells me quietly, don't worry about that. Don't worry, honey, don't worry your little head about that. I'm a good priest, just listen to me. Well, that's a bad ecclesiology, because the priest is only as good as his bishop's confession of faith. That's Orthodox ecclesiology 101. All right? I don't care how good your priest is. I don't care how good a priest I am. I don't think I'm really that good a priest. But I know that my bishop has a true confession of faith, and he doesn't pray with heretics, and doesn't compromise himself with being the World Council of Churches. So even though I'm not a good priest, but I'm a real priest, and I know my bishop may not be the holiest, best bishop ever lived, although I think our bishop is, actually I don't praise him too much, but he's a remarkably pious and prayerful person and truly Orthodox. But he's a real bishop. So don't get caught up in emotional stuff about, well, Father's this and Saint that. You have to focus, keep your eye on the ball. Where's the confession of faith? Okay. And don't get caught up in visions. Recently, a couple of years ago, actually, my chanter, who is a PhD in Byzantine history from the University of Chicago. And by the way, footnote, they're going to tell you all the old calendarists are ignorant, they're stupid, they're crazy, they're uneducated. All right, well, my chanter, the man who comes and just humbly chants for a parish of 40 people on Sundays, he has a PhD from the University of Chicago in Byzantine history. Okay, he's not stupid. All right. And we have a lot of people who are educated, but we don't brag about our education, unlike a lot of other people I know about. So he and his father-in-law were in Manathos a few years ago. And of course, they're visiting the zealots, the non-commemorators, and Esphigmeno and so forth. They also visited the commemorating monasteries. And then they were at a monastery, and the monk pulled them aside and said, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, you're in big trouble. Y'all are outside the church. Old calendars, you're outside the church." And my friend started, here are the canonical arguments, why we broken communion, why we have a separate hierarchy, blah, blah. He wanted to talk about the canons, but orthodoxy versus ecumenism, the history of the church, and so forth. And this monk launched into an hour-long diatribe about all the visions that these recent so-called saints, Elder Paisios, Elder Ephraim's still alive, I guess. Once he's dead, they're going to make him a saint too, but they had all these visions, and the visions say that the old calendars are outside the church, and Patriarch Bartholomew is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And my friend was just aghast. We thought Manathos is the citadel of orthodoxy, and here's this man who's giving a classic textbook example of trusting in visions, which is, all the Holy Fathers tell you that's prima facie evidence of plani in Greek, prelest, and so on, a delusion, right? So this is a bad thing. Don't go trusting in visions. We don't make visions and miracles the criterion for our confession of faith. Certainly God gives real visions and real miracles to real saints to confirm our faith, but it's not the criterion of faith. All right. People, for example, get all worked up about the Holy Fire in Jerusalem, and the Holy Fire is great. I love it. I think it's a miracle. It's great, beautiful. But if they disprove the Holy Fire tomorrow, I couldn't care less. I'd care about the souls that would be damaged because they put their trust in these kind of things, right? But it wouldn't affect my faith one bit, right? Because their faith isn't based on things like that. Okay, or like the Catholics who base their faith in the Shroud of Turin, and they go back, they're breathlessly waiting for the next stage in the debate about the Shroud of Turin. Well, really, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So don't get caught up in stuff like that. So those are preliminary remarks about getting sidetracked. Keep your eye on the ball. Where's the confession of faith? If you don't know the confession of faith, you don't know where the church is. Okay. Now, another thing, don't fall for logical fallacies. Okay. One logical fallacy is the ad hominem. The ad hominem is, a true Orthodox, for example, an old calendarist could say, well, I know that local New Calendar bishop, and he smokes and he has a girlfriend, so he's not a bishop. Well, that's first of all, it's an ad hominem. Secondly, it's a heresy. It's Donatism, right? So you don't fall for things like that. But then you have the New Calendarists. There's this kid I've talked about before, Jay Dyer, who has a big following on the internet. Very smart boy, and he's a quote unquote World Orthodox now, amongst some official group. I don't know what jurisdiction he's in. It doesn't matter. But then he says, people call him. I've had people who contact me, and I say, well, I talked to Jay Dyer, and he said, oh, forget the old calendar. I say, just crazy. Well, that's just an ad hominem, And I can't prove I'm not crazy. I wish I could prove I wasn't crazy. Maybe I should get myself committed and examined and get a certificate saying I was released. But that's just an ad hominem. You can't say, well, they're crazy, they're goofballs, they're ridiculous, don't listen to those people. That's the argument of a man who doesn't have an argument. Okay, so these are ad hominems. Then there's straw men. What's a straw man? They set up a false argument, you demolish it. Well, the old calendar, I've mentioned a straw man already. Well, the old calendars believe in 13 days, or all they care about is the calendar. That's a straw man. That's not, that's a fake. You present that your opponent has a bad argument, and then you demolish the bad argument. Okay. Then there's begging the question. Well, the old calendars have a point, but they're uncanonical, or they're schismatics. Well, that's begging the question. We have to debate who is the canon, who's keeping the canons, and who really who created the schism, right? Who's gone to schism? So that's begging the question. And then there's the appeal to authority. Well, you've got to stay with the patriarch, all right? So there's this guy with a big title, and you work this emotional thing on somebody, you scare them. Well, that's what the Catholics do with people with the Pope all the time. The Pope, Pope Francis could offer human sacrifice in St. Peter's Square on international television, and they'd still scare the Catholics into staying with him. Well, you got to stay with the Pope. He's the Holy Father. Well, the Orthodox do the same thing nowadays with the patriarch. So he's not with the patriarch. So you get all freaked out. Oh, I better not leave the patriarch. I feel so secure being with this official church. So that's the appeal to authority. Now, there is true authority, of course. In the church, we obey true authority. But you don't just appeal to a supposed or legalistic or official authority and say, well, that proves it. Patriarch settled it. That the patriarch said it. I believe it. That settles it. Kind of fideism. Irrational faith in an institution. So those are some logical fallacies that are tossed out there. So we can't fall for those. That's a bunch of nonsense. So I want you to get y'all started. So I've been talking for nearly an hour now, and enough's enough. I want to get you started with some reading. If you haven't read these things yet, you've really got to read them. The classic, the first, you might say, manifesto known to the English-speaking world against ecumenism was written by a poor soul named Alexandros Kalomiros. Alexander Kalomiros, Kalomiros. His book's called Against False Union. And that's the first book a lot of us read about ecumenism. And boy, it hits you between the eyes. He's not always completely accurate. He says some things that are widely emotional or hyperbolic. But boy, it gets you thinking. And just the sincerity of the man, his pain, his deep inner pain about all this stuff is very moving. It was written back in 1960 or thereabouts. And, people talk about Father Seraphim Rose. A lot of y'all heard about, we've talked about Father Seraphim Rose, obviously, in this class. And a lot of people say, well, Father Seraphim Rose, was moderate, and he was not a flaming extremist like those old calendarists. Well, I'll tell you on one thing. I was good friends with Father Alexi Young back in the 90s. We worked together as we were basically co-pastored a church in the 80s and then again in the 90s. And I spent a lot of time with Father Alexi, and even though I didn't know Father Seraphim, Father Alexi, who was one of his close co-workers, told me a lot about Father Seraphim. He said, when I came to Father Seraphim Rose, he said, there are two books you've got to read. For your spiritual life, you've got to read Unseen Warfare. And a lot of us know about Unseen Warfare. I've done a class, as you all know, last year on Unseen Warfare. And he said, and you've also, about the contemporary church situation, you've got to read Against False Union by Kalomiros, right? So Kalomiros went way crazy. Way off track about evolution and about he believed that there was this heresy of clericalism and people should only go to confession to God-bearing elders and stuff like that. So he said a lot of crazy things later on. But about ecclesiology, the man is really spot on. And it's a great book. So it's not the only book you need to read. It is just to get you fired up, so to speak, about this question of ecumenism. So Against False Union by Alexandros Kalomiros. You can find it. It's all over the place. You can find inexpensive copies all over the place. There's a very good site called Ecumenism-the Path or A Path to Perdition by Lyudmila Perepyorkina. That's Liudmila, and then Perepyorkina, Perepiolkina. Lyudmila Perepyorkina. The Path to Perdition. I've got the link in the notes. It's ecumenism with a Z, ecumenism.tripod.com. So look at my notes in the blog, orthodoxtruth.org, to get that link. It's a very a collection of excellent articles about these problems of ecumenism and the apostasy of the quote-unquote official Orthodox hierarchies. Then there is the statement of my own church. Okay, again, this is full disclosure. Who were we? Who's Father Stephen? I belong to the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, under Archbishop Kalinikos. We're in communion with True Orthodox Christians in Romania and in Bulgaria. We're trying to build, we're trying to reach out and manifest the unity of the Church by trying as hard as we can to be in communion with all the true Orthodox. And in 2014, there was a church union with our church and the true Orthodox Christians, a few from Russia, and then this large church in Romania, and now a little church in Bulgaria. And the document we issued at the time is this document, The True Orthodox Church and Heresy of Ecumenism. True Orthodox Church and the Heresy of Ecumenism. And that's basically our manifesto or statement of why we are, where we are, who we are. That you'll find that on our Metropolis website, hatka.org, and I've got the link in the notes. And now, so you're going to read all these things. You're going to read Kalomeros, and this is just fiery Mediterranean Greek hyperbole and rhetoric, and it's just wonderful. I mean, just carries you away, sweeps you away with it, with the power of the whole thing and the feeling of the whole thing. And now for a book with a totally different tone, coming from our calm, one hesitates to say, but one is tempted to say diffident, British brethren. There's a very good book called Christian Union, an Orthodox Christian's Guide to Ecumenism, Past, Present, and Future, by our own St. Edward Brotherhood in Brookwood, England. This is a little slim volume, a little softcover slim volume that is just a very excellent, calm, very British, very dispassionate, almost sort of offhand, introduction to this problem of ecumenism. And it's very good because, most of us get carried away and we start throwing mud pies and our worst things at each other. And, our English brethren are so good because they're often so calm, And so this calm, dispassionate, quiet exposition of the problem perhaps might be more convincing than all the fulminations of a Kalomeros, or the fulminations of a Father Stephen, for that matter. So it's Christian Union, question, then subtitle, An Orthodox Christian's Guide to Ecumenism, Past, Present, and Future, by the St. Edward Brotherhood. I mentioned St. Edward in a podcast last week from my blog about our dear St. Edward, the righteous King of England, who was a holy passion bearer, and his relics are in a monastery of our jurisdiction in Surrey, in Merry Old England, or what used to be Merry Old England. So look that up. I've got the link in the notes. And just buy that little book. I don't know how much it is in pounds or dollars, but the fathers are good about getting it to you, sooner or later. And I think sooner rather than later. So I really encourage y'all, even if you don't read anything else, just start with that book. Actually, I should have said that book first because it's probably the best introduction before you read the fulminations of Kalomeros, which are actually much more exciting, but perhaps not as informative. A lot of fire, whereas with St. Edward's book, you have a lot of light. So those are some reading suggestions. I encourage you all to read all that. And if you have questions, you can write me. I apologize, in the modern American sense, I apologize. I ask your forgiveness if I don't get back to you right away. But if you have questions or you want to cuss me out or whatever it may be, just feel free to write, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope this new tack I'm taking is useful, because I'll try to talk to you more often. And again, I apologize for whatever roughness or incompleteness in my presentation, because it's not very polished. And I hope that we can grow together in our understanding. And as St. Benedict says so beautifully toward the end of his rule, may the Lord bring us all together to his heavenly kingdom, to life everlasting. Amen.